Good morning and welcome everyone to our monthly webinar, Beyond the Field. I'm your moderator, Amanda McLean, the Farm Management Specialist here with North Dakota Farmers Union. Thank you for joining us today, as the purpose of these webinars are to bring you timely information on decisions that will help with your own operation or business. These webinars are held the third Thursday of each month at 10 a.m. Central Time. Today, we will be covering adding value on the farm, the Value Added Producer Grant Overview. A few housekeeping tips before we get started. Everyone is currently on mute, but at any time, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them into the chat or the Q&A, and we will have time at the end of today's presentations for questions with our guest speakers today. Also, these webinars, as I said, are being recorded. If you would like to watch this one or any of our previous webinars, you can find them by going to YouTube and searching North Dakota Farmers Union. Also, we ask that you please take the exit survey at the end of this webinar, as it helps to develop content for what's important for you. With that, today I'd like to introduce our guest speakers. First, we have Casey Elkins, who is a Business and Cooperative Program Specialist with USDA Rural Development in North Dakota, and she serves as the state lead for the Value Added Producer Grant. She works with rural businesses, cooperatives, and agricultural producers to help identify the right rural development programs and move projects forward. Casey focuses on practical guidance and clear, straightforward support to help navigate funding opportunities and strengthen rural development. Casey is currently based out of the Dickinson location for rural development. Also today, we have our special guest, Bill Rotenberger, who is a rancher and business owner and operator of Spruce Hill Ranch and Spruce Hill Meats out of Bowman, North Dakota. Bill has built a reputation for building high quality local source beef products through the leveraging a value added producer grant, which he got last year. Bill launched a marketing expansion initiative that allowed him to scale both his production and retail sales throughout Old West Mercantile's grocery store out of Bowman. He's a lifetime agricultural producer. He has also been ranching since 1984. Before that, he was a veterinarian. After retiring from his veterinary medicine work, Bill grew the Spruce Hill Ranch and then led into the operation of meat processing. With that, I will turn it over to you, Casey and Bill.
Hi, Amanda. Thanks for including us today. I really appreciate it. Okay, so I'm going to get started with the presentation. Thank you all for joining us today. And I wanted to tell you about the Value Added Producer Grant, also known as VAPG. This presentation is an overview of VAPG basics, application criteria, and the application process. So without further ado, let's get started. The purpose of the Value Added Producer Grant, or VAPG, is to provide funds for economic planning or eligible working capital expenses to enable viable for-profit ag producers to develop businesses that produce and market value-added ag products, with the end goal being an increase in customer base and increase in revenue going back to the farm from pursuit of this value-added venture. So because there are some misconceptions about what the program supports, I wanted to briefly discuss what the program is not. So if any of these ideas are what you had in mind, please reach out after the webinar sometime and we can discuss other programs that may be a better fit for you. So VAPG is not a job training program or a program intended to teach people how to farm. It's for viable ag producers that are currently and actively engaged in production. This is also not a technical assistance program like some of our other programs. It's also not for R&D. The program is a grant program, not a loan. And it's also not intended as a continuous stream of capital. What I mean by that, though, is that these projects should be viable. and the grant funds are used more as a kickstart in the implementation of the project to get it off the ground and established during the grant period, ending with a viable project that continues after grant expiration. So VAPG is a national competition that operates on the federal fiscal year, October through September. We are currently in FY26 through September 30th, and FY27 will begin October 1st. The FY26 application window has closed, and USDA, we're currently in the process of awarding approximately $27 million in funding across roughly 200 awards. The Notice of Funding Opportunity, also known as a NOFO, for FY27 has not yet been published, so final funding levels and maximum grant amounts are not confirmed. However, they generally align closely with the prior year. So using FY26 as a guide, the maximum award amounts are $50,000 for planning grants and $200,000 for working capital grants. The period of performance cannot exceed 3 years, meaning a project totaling $400,000 may span the full 3-year period with up to $200,000 in grant funds and $200,000 in required match. Applications must be submitted through the grant application portal, which we will cover a little bit later. And I just wanted to mention, so although the FY27 NOFO is not yet released and applications aren't currently being accepted, we are presenting this information now to ensure that applicants are prepared once that window opens. And typically the period runs from November 1st through February 15th. So the following reserve funds will be made available each fiscal year. 10% of total program funding to fund projects that benefit beginning farmers or ranchers or socially disadvantaged farmers or ranchers, and 10% of total program funding to fund projects where a majority of the requested grant amount goes to improving food safety for the purpose of enhancing market access, and 10% of total program funding to fund projects that propose development of a mid-tier value chain. Reserved funds that are not obligated by September 30th of each fiscal year shall be available to the Secretary in the next fiscal year to make grants under this subpart eligible to eligible applicants in the general funds competition. And if an applicant is not awarded funding within the reserved fund competition, that applicant will have the opportunity to compete for the general, so the non-reserved funds, with other eligible VAPG applications. Now let's discuss applicant eligibility. To start, all applicants must have an active SAM registration and a UEI, or Unique Entity Identifier, which is issued through sam.gov. SAM is completely free, but it takes 3 to 4 weeks to complete this process. And if you haven't already, I encourage you to start this process as soon as possible. All applicants must also document that they have the legal authority to carry out the grant and that their business is in good standing through the Secretary of State, where it's incorporated, or their primary location. Applicant type. So there are 4 applicant types. And at the most basic level, the VAPG applicant type must be a for-profit agricultural producer producing an ag commodity that is developed into a value-added product. Agricultural producer is the basis for all applicant types and includes a group of multiple agricultural producers, a farmer-rancher cooperative, or majority-controlled producer-based business, which is less common. The overarching applicant requirements for all 4 applicant types are that they meet the definition of agricultural producers defined as an individual or entity that produces an agricultural commodity through participation in the day-to-day labor, management, and field operations, and that they currently produce and own more than 50% of the raw commodity that will be used for the value-added product. Ownership must be maintained from the raw commodity state through the production of the value-added product. So let's discuss that a little more. If you needed to purchase additional product from a neighboring farm or outside source to make the volume or add ingredients to the value-added product, that's acceptable so long as 51% of the raw commodity is produced by the applicant. If you're procuring commodity that you haven't produced, you must document and state where the additional commodity is coming from. And that documentation is typically a letter from the other producer. When it comes to contract production, applicants that produce an agricultural commodity under contract for another entity, but do not own the commodity or value-added product, are not considered agricultural producers under VAPG. Also, entities that contract out the production of the ag commodity are also not considered ag producers under VAPG. Applicants must meet the definition of an ag producer and participate in the day-to-day labor, management, and field operations of producing an ag commodity to be an eligible applicant. Lastly, applicants must certify that 50% or more of individuals have U.S. citizenship. Applicants must only submit one application per solicitation or application window and have one active VAPG award at any given time. Moving on to project eligibility. So the project must focus on allowable planning or working capital grant activities with eligible tasks directly related to the processing and or marketing of the subject value-added agricultural product. The value-added product must fit within one of these 5 methodologies. So with the first methodology, change in physical state, that's the most common here in North Dakota. This is when the raw commodity is altered from its original form to something else that enhances its value, other than for preserving for later sale. Examples include milk into gelato or cheese, fruits to jam, or cattle to packaged beef for sale. Next, we have the produced in a manner that enhances the value of the ag commodity methodology, where the process used to grow or produce the commodity enhances its value, like free-range chicken eggs, grass-fed beef, or organically produced. Because a non-standard production method was used, that product would sell for a premium compared to standard production methods. There's also physical segregation. The best way to explain this is using an example like GMO corn and non-GMO corn, where they're grown and kept separately from each other in the production and harvest phases. So there's a distinction between the two all the way through to marketing, and there's a premium on the commodity because of the segregation. Next, there's farm or ranch-based renewable energy methodology. Wind and solar would not be eligible because they're not from an agricultural source, but anaerobic digesters could qualify. And if you're interested in this, please reach out and I can go over this with you one-on-one. We do have a fact sheet available on the webpage, or I can also share it. But at the national level, we haven't seen many projects that use this methodology. And the final methodology is locally produced ag food product. And this is great for those that aren't changing the physical state of their produce, or you can actually sell, for example, the corn as an ear of corn. The stipulation being that the product must be marketed and distributed within 400 miles of the product's origin. And this is often seen in farmers markets, where a premium is seen on locally produced foods. Matching funds. So this program does have a matching one-to-one requirement where combined grant and matching funds equal 100% of the total project costs. Matching funds can consist of cash, applicant or family member in-kind labor. Post-harvest, though, maybe marketing or packaging. And that time can be converted to a dollar amount as long as the provided services are limited to 50% of matching funds, and this match is seen on working capital requests. Match can also consist of applicant-produced in-kind raw commodity, appropriately valued, generally the value of the commodity at its harvest state. And this, however, can make up to 100% of the matching funds and is only applicable to the working capital grant. Less common forms of match include a loan or line of credit and third-party cash or labor. This must be a formal agreement between the third party and the applicant that is specific to the project. And in planning grants, the third-party in-kind contribution sometimes comes from the qualified consultant. A few more things to remember with match. It must equal 50% of the total project cost. So you take your total project cost and divide by 2, and that's your match requirement. You can only spend grant and matching funds on eligible expenses in your work plan. And also, VAPG is a reimbursement grant where you incur the costs and pay them in full before submitting those expenses back for reimbursement. And lastly, conflicts of interest are prohibited. So now we're getting into the allowable uses of grant and matching funds. There are 2 grant purposes, a planning grant or a working capital grant. For the planning grant, funds will be used to pay a qualified consultant to develop a feasibility study, a marketing plan, and/or a business plan related to the processing and/or marketing of a value-added project. So, for example, if you don't know whether or not your project is feasible, you would be able to use VAPG to fund that feasibility study. With the working capital grant, the funds are used toward eligible post-harvest, not production, expenses related to the processing and/or marketing of the value-added product. Examples include processing costs paid to non-family processors for labor, commercial kitchen rental, so time at a kitchen to process those berries into jam, co-packer costs for someone else to package the product, the bottles and packages that the product is being packaged into, ingredients like sugar for the jam recipe, advertising the value-added product. So it couldn't be just the farm, it has to be specific to the product, but social media or Facebook costs, billboards, print ads. Swag is not allowed though, so no logos on hats or backpacks, that would not be considered eligible. However, website development is considered eligible. Trade show attendance can be eligible if you're there to market your value-added product and not just attending to learn. Transporting fees, so not farm to the processing facility, but transporting from the facility to the store, to the consumer, shipping it, or even insurance specific to the value-added product. Also, costs incurred in obtaining post-harvest food safety certification. So food safety refers to conditions and practices that preserve the quality of food to prevent contamination and foodborne illnesses. Some potential eligible expenses include cleanable food contact surfaces or sorting and prep tables, portable wash tanks, bins, produce washers, salad spinners, food handling or training certifications, food and wash water testing tools, upgraded cleanable or single-use product packaging, and employee or visitor signage regarding proper food safety practices. So with working capital grants, there are 4 variations, and the variations are based on your applicant type and how long you've been producing the value-added product. Requests of $50,000 or more for products that have been supplied for less than 2 years are called emerging market proposals. Emerging market applicants must submit both a feasibility study and a business plan. And this option is available to all applicant types. Market expansion requests. Agricultural producers can request $50,000 or more to expand production of a product that has been produced for more than 2 years, where they want to expand the market that they're currently reaching. For these market expansions, applicants are not required to submit a feasibility study, just a business plan or marketing plan. They will, though, need to demonstrate that a new market, geographically or demographically, will be reached because of the grant. Keep in mind, though, that this market expansion option is only for agricultural producer types. Other types are not eligible for market expansion grants of this size. For smaller projects, less than $50,000, a simplified application is allowable for all applicant types. Applicants do not need to submit a feasibility study or business plan. However, they still need to provide supporting documentation to show how the product is viable by demonstrating the increases in customer base and revenue returns for the project. And finally, a simplified application for food safety is available for applicants with more than 50% of project costs used for post-harvest food safety purposes related to processing or marketing of a value-added product. All types of applicants are eligible, and a feasibility study and business plan are not required for the Simplified Food Safety Working Capital Grant. Now on to application requirements. Applications for the VAPG program must be completed through the Grant Application Portal, also known as GAP. GAP streamlines the application process and presents only questions and narrative response areas relevant to the application type that you're applying for. Before starting your application, we encourage, but do not require you to complete a VAPG self-assessment survey to help confirm eligibility for the program. Applications in GAP must be started by the authorized representative of the applicant entity who has signature authority. Applicants may work with the collaborator, so a grant writer or a technical assistance provider, or other representatives, like other owners or family members, of the applicant entity on completing the application. However, the owner of the applicant entity will be responsible for starting the application, responsible for edits made to the application by collaborators and representatives, and will be required to certify to the trueness, accuracy, and completion of the application. To access GAP, users need Level 2 eAuth access. eAuth is used to authenticate your identity. It's important to identify your team, whether it be collaborators and representatives, and ensure they have Level 2 eAuth access so they can be added to work on your application. And to create an account, visit eauth.usda.gov. Also for GAP, we have external user guides available for that portal, linked on the VAPG webpage, that cover each step of the portal. So that brings us to the end of the webinar. And before we get to questions, I just wanted to share my contact information there on the screen. I am available to work one-on-one with you offline, so please feel free to reach out. I am happy to help on that. I also want to thank Bill for joining me today. It's been a pleasure working with you, and I'm thankful that you're here to share this with them. So thank you.
Thanks, Casey. Thanks, Bill. I guess maybe before we get started on some questions, Bill, would you maybe mind telling a little bit about your background of how you got started into the meat processing and what made you apply for this grant, and maybe just a little bit of your experience of applying for this grant or any other grants you've applied for?
Well, I'm a veterinarian first. And after I kind of finished my veterinary practice and retired. I couldn't stand retirement. So my son suggested I buy a meat shop, and one thing led to another. And so I had a meat shop, which I'm very thankful for. It really does add to my life, I guess. We've been very fortunate in building the meat processing business, and part of that is, of course, financial. So you're always looking for ways to help with your business and expand it. And one of the things that came up was grants. For those of you that have been listening to Casey, um, it it will certainly appear to be overwhelming trying to apply for a grant. Um, I don't consider myself a dummy, but when it comes to this grant writing, I'm dumb. So you need help. You absolutely need to seek out professional people to help you with this because it truly is overwhelming if you try to do it by yourself. Um, Casey gave you the basis and the government guidelines and stuff, and it can scare you to death trying to fill all that out. So you need somebody familiar with the grant writing process. Just give you an example. Casey mentioned that you had to have a SAMS number, and it is free, but you're going to get emails and requests from people that will be able to file that SAMS number for you and charge you for it, and you don't need to pay for it because I have done that. That's a mistake I made. Uh, the most important thing is to surround you with professional people. Use them as your resource, use them to write your grant, review your grant, and you can never start too early doing the grant. Don't wait until even the last month. As soon as that grant comes out and you find out about it, you need to start working on it. You need to start putting things in place, and you need to review that grant more than once. Don't wait till the last week and review it because you're going to miss stuff. And the more you read it, the more information you can put into it. And what you're trying to do is to help the grant reviewers make a decision on whether your grant is better than the next person's grant. Give them as much information as you can and document it. You'll need letters of support and all the rest of that. Now I've gotten off track who I am, but who I am doesn't matter. Uh, it does help me being a veterinarian, understanding the sanitation process and the rest of that, uh, as far as the meat processing facility is concerned. The reason I have an outlet is because I found out one day that people within the town didn't realize I had a store associated with a meat shop. So I expanded into a facility within the community to do the selling of the product. Along with that, I also put in Pride of Dakota items within that store because I have plenty of room to do it. So it all ties together. As far as another grant, I received a grant from APUC, Ag Product Utilization Commission, to help with the advertising, the signage, and that sort of thing. And they were very supportive, uh, uh, very complimentary of what I was doing. That'll kind of bring us to the question period. I guess if you got questions, I'm here to answer as many as I can.
Thanks. And Bill, I know when we were talking before we got started, I had asked you how you kind of even heard about people who can help you with writing some grants, and you had mentioned that you went to your local bank and they gave you some local people in the area who are professionals in that. So that's a maybe a good thing too, was people are where to find those is just maybe even talking to your resources that you talk to every day, like your banker and your loan officers and things like that, right?
Yes, if the grant is money. So you go to the financial institutions and say, hey, how can I get help to expand or buy new equipment or whatever? And they should have ways or resources to suggest to you to help you. These grants, they are free. It's a grant. It's not a loan. Some of them do require a certain percentage of uh, uh, compensation or what's it?
Match.
Match. They require a certain percentage of match, and they're not all the same. I just finished applying for a grant for equipment, was 25% of the grant, the match. The other part of that grant, if you wanted to do facility improvements, was 50% of the grant. So they'll vary from grant to grant. You just have to find out if you can fulfill the match requirements. Casey has been a really good resource because she's very familiar with this grant, and she can inform you of the do's and don'ts and the questions you have. You can't read through a grant and make a decision on whether this applies or doesn't apply. You have to have some help doing it, and don't feel overwhelmed. I was felt overwhelmed until I got professional people that were behind me and said, yeah, we can do this, we can do that, whatever. But to try to figure it out yourself, I'll just tell you it's impossible.
Okay. Casey, we have a question that come in. This might also be for Bill too, but I think it might be more for you. With 51% ownership of product requirements, is it complicated in the meat processing realm when consumers might pay the rancher and processor separately for locally sourced products?
Well, go ahead, Casey. Casey can answer first, and then I'll add to it.
So what do you mean? Like it's complicated?
Um, I think it's more of like you got to pay for the rancher, if they're selling more, not maybe necessarily in Bill's case, but like they're selling off a food truck at the local CSA, or they're paying for the processing, but consumers might pay the rancher and processor separately from locally sourced products. So instead of the case of Bill, where they could go to his store, it's his beef and he's processing it right there, versus some other people, again, where it's their beef, they take it to a processor, pay for that processor, and then pay for getting the beef too.
Okay, so I think I understand a little better. So the 51% is that, so if you don't have to have a store like Bill. We've seen nationwide, there's people that they don't have stores. The majority don't, right? And they sell it. So they have their own cattle. They take it to a butcher. They pay the processing fees on that. And that is a working capital expense that could be, reimbursed through VAPG. Then that applicant can sell that packaged beef under their own name through whatever means they plan to. So they might need they might have like rental space in like a freezer, because we can't purchase equipment with VAPG, but if it's like a rental for freezer space, that's fine. And then even transporting it, we've seen that, like where they're planning on going to Bismarck, once a week. They're going to Jamestown once a week, and they're selling it out of a truck. So we can't purchase a truck, but we can rent a truck, or maybe you already own the truck and it's just transporting fees. So we'd have to cover like fuel as part of this. That's kind of how a person would do that without like an actual store. So I'm hoping that answered the question, that's more common. That's the common way we would see that, is that you would, cover those processing fees through a butcher and then sell it. And we've also seen like direct consumer selling, I think is what the more common method is. Also online, people have online sales and have, looked into shipping that beef for product throughout the state or throughout the country. Just depends on what your scope of your project is.
And the VAP would help with those online sales.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yep, exactly. So that
you're not buying equipment, basically.
Nope. Website equipment, also shipping. So if that could be something that you could cover with those sales also, shipping it, packaging. So the actual like freezer boxes, or those package, the mailing styrofoam boxes, or whatever you choose or need. That would be a VAPG working capital product.
Perfect. Bill, did you want to add anything to that?
The only thing I'd add is all that has to be designated in the original application. As to you can't just come in and say, all right, I'd like to change this. I'm going to do this and do that. This has to be all kind of in the initial grant. You have to spell it out.
Perfect. Casey, can multiple producers apply together, like through a co-op or a producer working group for a VAP?
Yes, yes. So ag producer groups and cooperatives may apply for planning grants or simplified working capital grants applications. So less than $50,000 for that marketing expansion proposal, or up to $200,000 for the emerging market proposals. But yes, absolutely.
Cool. Um, what other value added opportunities do you see kind of growing in North Dakota or at least in the upper Midwest that are using the value added grants?
So packaged beef has been popular. Also locally produced ag food products um, like honey or like egg sales. We've seen more of that lately.
Bill, question for you. So you talked about like, you went to your loan officer and or the bank and they kind of directed you. Is there any other local resources that you would encourage people to maybe help them on either finding grants or helping write grants? What's out there? I know you said you did a lot of research yourself, but is there any others in the community that maybe people don't think about that are out there?
Well, there's a regional economic development corporation in Bowman, and since it's called regional, I assume that there are different regions within the state, and they are really the main source. I mean, they should be able to have a list of all the grants that are applicable to the people within that community.
Yes, I believe you're right. I think there is 7 or 8 regional economic developments, but I might be wrong. But I know you can search that too um, on the North Dakota website. Is there anything else that you would like to add, Bill, from your experience of that you found frustrating, helpful tips, especially for somebody who's new, maybe getting into this and thinking about applying for some of these grants, or specifically this one? Is there any best practices that you would recommend that you maybe haven't covered already or want to reiterate?
Well, I don't know if I've mentioned it already or not, but to find a competent grant writers, uh, individuals that's basically their job, and that's their profession is to write grants. They have written other grants that are similar, so they have all the context, they have all the information to fill out your grant. Don't I felt very frustrated when I first looked at it and thought, there's no way I can't fill this thing out. Well, I was fortunate enough to find two young grant writers, ladies, that was their business and that's what they enjoyed doing. And you need someone like that. And then one thing leads to another, and I got this grant, and then Casey becomes involved in helping me with this. This is It's so easy to be overwhelmed by it and say, phooey, I'm not going to do that. That's too much work and I'll never get it anyway. And if you don't get a grant, doesn't mean that you haven't got a good grant. You maybe just you're in competition with other businesses that are applying for these grants. So you have to review your grant or with your grant writers to redo it. And the people that will review your grant will tell you the areas that you are short in. They will give you a critique of your grant. Uh, so use that, but don't become discouraged. Just keep applying, keep looking for grants. Um, Sometimes in my own mind, a grant is you're asking for a handout, but the government is there to encourage us to utilize that money to improve the quality of food to our local area. And so dispel the idea that um, you're riding welfare. You're not. This is something the government's putting out there to promote for the local communities.
Thanks,
And I'll
Bill.
just put a little pitch in here. The ladies that I work with, their organization is called Realizing Rural. There are two young ladies. They now live in Pierre, and they do an excellent job. They're very conscientious, very thorough. They have the background for doing it. And once you're able to kind of figure out the sentence structure and the paragraph structure and the information that needs to go in there, it's a whole lot different than trying to do it yourself.
Thanks for that. Casey, can the VAP grant be used for any flower farms or like a butterfly house type of application? Sorry, not a butter house, a butterfly.
So butterfly. So for flowers, right, we really have to look at those methodologies. So for the locally produced, it has to be a food product. So if you're having some sort of like edible flowers, I could see it potentially fitting under that. The other one we would potentially would fit is that organically, so that produced in a method. So if they're like organic flowers, where you can show a premium on this organic flower versus a commercial flower, then it could fit there. But yeah, you really have to see how your project and if it will fit in one of those methodologies. And something I wanted to add, so reach out if there's any questions. There was I remember with Ruralizing Rural one time, they said, I didn't know I could, that someone could just call while we're working on it and I can I could review a project. I totally can. You don't have to wait to submit to reach out. You can say, hey, how is this coming? If there's any questions during the process, before this process, you reach out and I can look at it and try and get those answers answered and also kind of get us on the right track.
I'd add to that if you've got an idea, call Casey. That you don't have to have it all finalized and you don't have to have all the feasibility studies and all that paperwork done. If you've got an idea and you haven't even written anything yet, call and ask what avenue should I use or can I use or is this idea even feasible?
Perfect. Casey, one thing before we finish is I know you are specific on the VAP, but I don't think a lot of people know as much about rural development and some of the different grants and opportunities that rural development has to offer. Do you just want to maybe provide some of that, like the REAP program and some of the other things that you guys offer that people might not even know about?
Yeah, and thank you for that opportunity. Rural development has such a wide umbrella. So I'm with the business team, and that's VAPG, that's REAP, Rural Energy for America program. Right now, that does not have an application window at the moment, but it will be opening. Anyway, that's for energy improvements. That's also toward other like ag producers or rural small business owners. We also have some guaranteed loan options. There's this MPEP, Meat and Poultry Expansion Program. So that's for the meat and poultry processing facilities. There's a new Fields program that recently closed for fertilizer improvement and expansion program. But so that's business. Other than that, they're like rural development. We have like a single family home team. We also have community facility and water improvements. So that's for rural communities. Like if your community is in need of like an ambulance or a ambulance is the one that comes to mind, police department, anything like that, like reach out because even though it's USDA and agriculture, it's a rural community and they all intertwine and that's what rural development is here to do is to improve rural America.
Well, thank you, Casey, and thank you, Bill. I don't see any more other questions come in, but again, I'll be sharing out Casey's contact information. And Bill, are you okay if we maybe put your contact information or at least the website to your guys's, if anybody ever has any questions specifically, would you maybe
Sure.
share your experience? Awesome.
Yeah, no, I'd be glad to do that.
Well, thanks.
Yep.
I appreciate it. Again, this recording, you can find it on YouTube along with our other recordings. We hope you join us next month. On September 17th, we will be doing From Local Workers to H2H workers, exploring farm labor solutions. So with that, I want to thank you again for joining us, and thank you, everybody. Hope you have a good day, and we will see you next month. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Casey. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.